Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now today I'm going to show you how you can get a pretty decent result for your Deathwatch Marines using dry brushing. Now a lot of folks will tell you that you can't dry brush a Space Marine. I'm here to correct that, that gross oversight. Now I have already very recently done black armor using dry brushing, but I thought a slightly different method would be useful, and there are also a couple of tips on how you can tweak your edge highlighting, so if you're having trouble with that, follow along near the end because I think you'll find that really useful. Now all of the paints for this will be listed in the description below, so without any further mucking around, let's get started. Now obviously we've started off by priming this fella in black. Now I've used the Army Painter's Matte Black, but any black primer will do the job here. We're actually not going to see very much of this once we're finished. Now to start off with, I've got here some Corvus Black, and this is in reality a very dark grey. What I'm going to do is I've thinned it down a little bit with a wee bit of water on my palette, and I'm just going to apply this fairly generously over all of the armor, all of the black areas. When you get to anywhere that isn't going to be black later, don't worry about it, just pop straight over the top. To be quite honest, it'll probably help with some of the base coats we're going to lay down later. Now we're doing this just because it gives us a little bit that we can do with the black. If we're painting over straight flat black, then there's not an awful lot you can do to shade it. Versus if we use a very dark grey, we can trick the eye, but still not have to worry too much about it not looking black. So let's finish this off, and that's pretty much done now, but let's let that dry. Now once that's dry, you'll see some of the difference between his bolt gun there and the rest of his armor, but it's a nice dark, like really dark shaded grey, perfect for what we've got in mind. For now, we're going to put him aside though, and bring out one of the most important tools in our arsenal, a piece of cardboard. Now, I've primed this in black, and you'll see some of my previous efforts on it here. A sprayed bit of cardboard is honestly going to give you a really useful tool while you're dry brushing. Reason being, if I grab here, I have some Longbeard Grey and one of my little makeup brushes. These are brilliant because they're nice and soft, so you can't really apply too much pressure while you're applying your dry brush to your miniature. So let's work that into the bristles on a bit of kitchen towel. And then we can use our incredible tool to dry brush that surface. Now you see I've left a big smudge here, and that's probably because I've got too much, there we go, there's a little too much on my brush there. But let's just do a quick scrubbing motion to work that out. And this gives us a really good look at what we're going to leave behind when we dry brush our miniature. So that's pretty much what I want. I'm going to put this aside for now, and we'll go back to our Space Marine. Now what I'm going to do is to dry brush fairly carefully. I want to catch the edges of detail. So I'm not pushing down very hard at all. And what I'm doing is just by flicking against any hard edges, you'll see even on the top of the power plant here, I get this nice off-white highlight at the edges. Now particularly on these little roundel parts, you'll see that it does go a little bit chalky, but we are going to fix that later. So for now, I'm going to go around the whole miniature, and I am going to dry brush. See, there's another example. Too much on my brush. But we are going to dry brush all of the edges as neatly as we can. But don't worry about any mistakes. We're going to fix those up in a second. Now after just a few seconds, we've picked out all of the edges of detail, but you'll see straight away, and you're probably saying, "Oh, Sonic, you've led me astray, you are a bounder and a cad." These big chalky white areas are not what we want, but not to worry. Just go back to your base coat. So I'm using Corax Black, but if you haven't added this, you could just go straight back to Abaddon Black. All I'm going to do is grab my medium layer brush, and I will just black in again some of the areas where there is a little more of this than I would like. Now you'll find that this probably takes, quite honest, a little bit longer than just edge highlighting, but if you're like me and you haven't really got the steadiest hands, this can be an incredibly easy way to sort of fake out that effect. So I'm going to go around the whole miniature now and just pick those areas where there's too much Longbeard Grey for my liking. And we'll come back in a second and have a look at what that looks like. Now after your tidy up stage, you're going to have something that looks a little like this. If you want to avoid doing that, you can just go a little lighter with your dry brushes. It will look quite Tron at the moment, but we are going to tone that down with a shade. But before we shade it, we're going to add the steel. And for this, well, I'm using Iron Hand Steel. Reason being is, on the bolter in particular, I want to avoid having to highlight if I don't have to. So starting from the slightly brighter base color is going to work well for us. So we'll apply this all over the arm. So the funky Deathwatch shoulder pad, the Space Marine's arm, and into his bolter. Any other little silver details, you can touch that in now. In some areas, you're going to find you do want to come back and give it a second coat. Like here, for example, I'm going to want a stronger color there, but you can be the judge of that on your miniatures. Now on these Deathwatch Marines, there is quite a bit of silver, so that will take a little bit of time. Now, as well, on the back here, officially, these little power plant vents, they tend to be done in black. I've done them silver because I think it looks cooler, and you can't stop me. So that's why I've done that. We're going to move on now. I have Khorne Red, and I'm going to put this onto his bolter. Now, I've already gone over some of the areas with a little bit of silver, but not to worry. And I'd suggest as well, when you've got these little bits of scroll work and what have you on the bolter, just paint over those for now, and we will touch them up later. Now once you've applied the red, go back with a little bit of Iron Hand Steel and do any tidy up if there's red where there shouldn't be red. I've got now some Drakenhof Nightshade, and I'm giving this a really good shake. We're going to apply this to all of the armor and the silvered arm. The Vulcan we're going to avoid. So let's go ahead and just start dunking this over the whole miniature. Now when you come to these areas, you're probably going to want to pull some of it away while it's still wet. Drakenhof Nightshade looks super blue going on, but as it dries it will mellow out a bit. What I'm going to do is just cover over pretty much the whole miniature. Like I said, we're going to avoid the bolt gun. So if you want to do his hand, you're probably going to be best off switching down to a smaller brush for this. Same too, when I come to his pack, I'm going to try and avoid the power plant stuff, because I want to Nuln Oil those later. But for now, let's get on this Drakenhof Nightshade. Now once that's dried, we've got a really cool blue-black finish to the armor, and all of that shading on the silver stuff. But it's a little blue on the flatter areas. So I've got here some Necron Compound and a teeny tiny wee dry brush. Now when you're dry brushing close to areas that you don't want to touch, just start near to them and flick your brush away. And doing that, I am going to dry brush the silver on the shoulder pad, and we'll also catch his arm here too. And as easy as that, there's our Deathwatch shoulder done. Now I'm going to apply a little Nuln Oil to the red rather, and the sort of working parts of the metal. So I need a little more there actually. So a little bit of this over all of the Khorne Red and the Iron Hand Steel, and if you have painted in the little bobbles on the back, don't forget to hit them with some of this now too. Now while that's drying, we can actually move on and apply a few more base coats. There's not really very much more to do. I'm using Dryad Bark for the leather, though I have seen quite a few variations on Deathwatch gear. I prefer a slightly darker leather colour. It's really up to you though. So let's apply this to all of the leather things, including his belt. We'll use just a tiny bit of Retributor Armour for any gold details, so mostly skulls. And then finally, on any purity seals or scroll work, just a little bit of Rakarth Flesh. And now with a small layer brush, I'm going to add just a little bit of Agrax Earthshade over those to dull them down a bit, give them a bit of depth. When you come to any scroll work like this, I tend to suggest, rather than splashing the whole thing, just paint a little bit into the corners where the folds in that detail are. Now finally we're going to flip him upside down, because I tend to find this is the easiest way to reach eyes. So I've got here a little bit of Corax White. You can use White Scar or whatever you've got. And let's... oh goodness, this is a little difficult to show you on the camera unfortunately, but Holding him upside down makes it less likely you're going to hit sort of the cheek section of his armor. Now once that's dried, don't worry yet whether or not you've got any little blips or blops where they shouldn't be. First of all, we're going to apply a contrast color. You can pick which one you'd like. You know, some of your Deathwatch Marines might have different lenses in their helmets, but I'm using Blood Angel's Red. So a little bit of this just into the socket there. That might be a bit much, but we'll see when that dries. Now while that dries, speaking of Corax White, we're going to go around to his shoulder pad. Now this is not unique to, every single Marine, but I know some of you are going to ask how I did the Howling Griffin, so let's do it. So I've got that Corax White, and we're going to apply this carefully. You want to make sure as much as possible you're not hitting any areas that you've already got the way you like. But over the black, you'll see this covers extremely well. And I'm probably going to do 2 coats of this and get a nice white shoulder pad. Now once you've got a decently solid white, I've got here Yriel Yellow, and I'm going to apply this. Now these shoulder pads are quartered, but at the moment I don't really care, because I'm going to use the red to quarter them later. For now, because the coverage on the yellow is not quite as good, I want to apply this fairly messily, and I can tidy this up later. Now over the white, this is going to be much better than trying to do 27,000 coats of this on black, so that little bit of preparation will pay dividends here, but you are still going to need to do 2, maybe 3 coats, to be honest, to get a nice solid yellow here. Now 2 coats later, this is what you'll have, and I'm quite liking the look of that so far. It is still very messy, but we're going to tidy that up now with our red. For this, I'm using Mephiston Red. And here we go. We want to find the center of the griffin and just mark it like so. Then tilt your Marine, because I find it easier to draw a straight line sort of towards me. So let's just, I know I just said towards me, but there is actually a very good guide on this on the Warhammer TV site, which I will link in the description. I'm using a slightly different method, but theirs will help too. I'm going to try and quarter this now, so wish me luck. Now I've seen some official sources that have these shoulder pads halved rather than quartered, and I tell you what, if you want to save your sanity, maybe consider that route. This is not perfect, I don't think, but it's actually a little bit difficult to see without the griffin painted. So I've got some black, and I've got my small layer brush. Let's fill in the griffin. Very, very carefully. Now finally, I've got a little Agrax Earthshade, and I'm going to paint this just into the recess of the shoulder pad, just to get some of that definition back in the corners there. Alright, now remind me in the future, I don't want to do Howling Griffins again. What I've got here, we're going to move on, and I am going to do a little bit of cleanup with some edge highlighting, which I know I mentioned we didn't have to, but I do want to show you one little trick which will help with that. I've got some Fenrisian Grey here, and this is fairly close to our Longbeard Grey with the blue shade over it. What I'm going to do here is, you'll see up on his eyepiece, I've made a little bit of a mistake there, so I'm going to just tidy that up with some of my Fenrisian Grey. But one trick you can use is if you turn around and, oh no, I've splodged in a huge amount of this gunk trying to do my highlight, well, fret not. Because in exactly the same way as we did with our dry brush, you can go back with some Corvus Black and just fix that up again in the same way. Little light flicks close up to the highlight, and you can even that out a bit. Now I've used that same trick just to add a little bit of definition to his arm here, which I had missed with the dry brush. Took just a few seconds, and I could tidy up very quickly by going back over sort of excess highlights. This is a good reason to have a wet palette, whether you buy one or make one yourself, because you can keep that base color as you're painting the rest of your Marine. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and hit him with a varnish. I would recommend Munitorum Varnish because it has a slight satin finish to it, but I don't have any at the moment, so I'm just going to varnish him with what I've got to hand. We'll pop a base on and see what he looks like when he's all finished. And then at last, our Deathwatch Marine is complete. Now from here, there's a ton that you could do to really improve the finish. You could highlight the leather or the bolt gun casing. It wouldn't take an awful lot of work to really improve this overall. But I think the basics are pretty sound, and without a whole lot of fuss, there is a really cool blue-black armor finish without having to muck around with a dozen different techniques. So as always, thank you very much to Exit 23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as the patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, and I really mean that. It's one that I sort of repeat at the end of every video, but genuinely, you guys are paying for my monthly paint top-ups and stuff like that. So thank you very much to everybody who is involved with that, in particular my producers, Alan Nuttall, Kyrie Crawford, Trainboy, Fred, and Jimmy. Your support is invaluable, folks. Any questions or anything, feel free to drop them in the old comment box below. My Twitter and Instagram are both linked there too. So thank you very much one and all, and you enjoy the rest of your day.